When it was originally announced, the One Piece live action was something I was dreading. I never really saw the potential in a live action adaptation of such a ridiculous anime, such a ridiculous story. I've always been pretty vocal that I don't think animated works should be translated into live action. I think the refrain of doing that here, the constant desire to do that, cheapens the love of animation, the beauty of animation. It really just forces such a creative, freeing type of medium where you can draw and do basically whatever you want, and cramps it into a whole of live action, restricting it in ways of what looks good on camera, and also ways that live action shows just have to flow in these modern times. And for the most part, when looking at adaptations of animated works, that's held out to be basically true. When you look at Disney's cynical remakes of their classics, or any kind of anime adaptation of a ridiculous concept from an anime or from a manga into live action, there are a few that have worked. I've said previously that I actually do like the original Death Note movies that came out back in Japan years and years and years ago. Those actually work pretty well. The first two movies, pretty good. And adaptations into live action for manga and anime and for any kind of work is achievable if you understand what you're adapting, how you're adapting it, and how you make such ridiculous concepts that you find in anime or any kind of animated series or any kind of, drawn series work in a live action setting. And so One Piece, a series that is so expressive, so exaggerated, so, for lack of a better term, long-winded, this is not a series I thought could really easily be translated into live action. I didn't think there was any chance that it would really work. But thankfully, we're on the other side of it here. One Piece live action is out. I've watched all 8 episodes. And Matt Owens, Steve Maeda, Eiichiro Oda, they have all come together to build something absolutely incredible. The cast, the crew, the characters, the retelling of the story, the sets, the designs, the costumes, the actual effects, everything works. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the source material though, I'll give a brief overview. Started in 1997, the manga One Piece, created by God King of Anime, Eiichiro Oda, follows the pirate Luffy. Luffy lives in a fantastical world that's mainly made up of oceans and a lot of small islands. It's a whole big weird design. We're not going to get into the world right now, but Luffy is a pirate who wants to be the king of the pirates, a title granted to the single greatest pirate in the entire era. Currently, there is no pirate king. There's only ever been one that we're aware of, and the previous one, Gold Roger, had this whole giant treasure, all the things that he collected that he left in one piece. The series takes place 22 years after Gold Roger's death, and people are still trying to find this grand treasure. Said to be at the end of the Grand Line, this special sea that stretches around the equator of this world. These oceans are crazy, wild, with all different kinds of crazy adventures that only the strongest pirates can even hope to survive. And at the start of the series, our main character Luffy is just a goofy little man with rubber powers who's washed up on a boat in a barrel because his own boat immediately sank after he set out for sea. The story then follows him going on various adventures, building up a crew, and going to the Grand Line to try to find the One Piece. And 1,090 chapters later, we're still looking for it. There's so much more that can be said about One Piece, but we don't really need to get into that now. Let's get back to the live action review. I'm gonna get it out of the way here. I love this adaptation. I think it's a perfect retelling of the East Blue Saga. I think it's a series that shows so much potential, and so it shows something that is sorely lacking in any other kind of anime adaptation, especially Netflix anime adaptations. But these stories can be retold in a live action format if you understand, love, and care for the work, like these creators clearly did. Matt Owens is clearly a huge fan of One Piece. Steve Maeda is clearly a huge fan of One Piece. And Eiichiro Oda is one of the most insane creators to exist on this planet. I'm a massive One Piece fan. I absolutely love everything about this series. I've loved its messages, I've loved its themes, its characters, its goofiness, its silliness, its seriousness. There is not a series out there that hypes me up as much as a One Piece moment. This series knows how to build, grow, change, and in any format that it comes out in, tell effective, engaging stories. Stories that are ridiculous and fantastical, but with these characters totally believable. There are a number of adaptational changes that have been made from the manga to the live action series. And a lot of those changes can feel really jarring, especially if you're someone who has grown up on the East Blue Saga, who has loved that story for years and years and years and years and years. I do love the East Blue Saga. I actually rewatched it recently when I got sick, but there are a lot of changes that make that story. There's a lot of characters that are introduced way before you would ever think that they are. There's the Marine Vice Admiral Garp, who in the anime and in manga chapter covers was technically introduced pretty early on, but was never given like a full understanding of who his character was until far, far, far later in the series. And that reveal in the anime and the manga is one of my favorite scenes, actually. I love Garp as a character, especially in their manga and anime adaptation format, and their change as a character here left me really worried for a majority of the series. Though I will say, by the 8th episode, they do actually really sell me on why they had it introduced him this early, and I don't have a problem with it, to be honest. But it was something that initially made me second guess, like, what exactly? Why is Garp here already? Then you have changes like Usopp's introduction arc, the Syrup Village arc, being entirely changed. It's completely different than the manga or the anime, which, I'm just gonna say it, outside of missing the character Django, who is this ridiculous hypnotist, nothing of value was lost by doing this. This actually just works a lot better than the manga did. The important things, the things that over 1,000 chapters in the manga are crucial for the overall story, are all there. The things that are important to be in a story about One Piece, to be in Luffy, Zoro, Sanji and Usopp's journey, and Nami's, of course, journey in the East Blue Saga, those are all still there. They just are adapted in a way that actually flows and works in the format of a TV show a lot better, which I think is the most important part, is understanding what you can cut, understanding what you should cut, understanding that this story, when created back in 1997 and 99 and all that way back then, that there were aspects of the story that were weaker than others and didn't have a place in an adaptation like this here. There's a number of personal favorite scenes, personal favorite gags that aren't gonna be in live action, but the showrunners and Oda were wise enough to understand that that doesn't work in live action. And you actually see Oda talk about this in some of the interviews that he's done, where his very intimate understanding that live action as a format is entirely different than manga. Like how he talks about how in the manga, Luffy doesn't really talk all that much, or he doesn't really say all that much. And the reason for that is because manga is a visual format. It is a graphic novel, and there's not as much space in the page to make it flow where you can actually add in as much dialogue as that, especially when it's a constrained format that has a certain amount of pages that you put out every single week, and each chapter needs to feel like its own contained story in a way. That specific format is entirely different than an hour-long drama series, right? With 8 episodes. Because people in real life don't talk like they do in manga. People in real life don't make the same poses, the same actions, the same over-the-top stylings that they would in a manga. And this series understands that and finds ways to understand that feeling in a way that is believable. And so when you have an actor like Eneki Godoy, who is incredible as Luffy. He actually really pulls off such a ridiculous, bombastic character in a realistic way. There are moments where Luffy is slightly annoying, but that's Luffy. Luffy's like that in the anime and the manga too, where he's ridiculous. That's the point. That's part of his point, right? He's kind of a child. Jacob Romero Gibson as Usopp is probably one of the biggest shout-outs I want to give, because this guy nails everything about Usopp and makes Usopp so much more fun and interesting, and he elevates the character of Usopp, and I really love everything he brings to it. I'm really excited to see what he does going forward into the next few seasons, because this is definitely going to get a season 2, and I can't wait for that, because there's so many cool things you could do based off the base you have with season 1. You have every character in the Straw Hat cast is amazing. Makanu's portrayal of Zoro is amazing. He really pulls off the stunts really well. As well as Taz Skylar, the actor for Sanji. One of the things that I really admire about the One Piece adaptation is that They do a lot of the action in camera. There's a lot of exceptional choreography here, and it feels heightened, but also realistic. It doesn't take you out of it in any kind of way. The fights are ridiculous, and characters are way stronger than other people in ways that are completely unrealistic, but that's the world of One Piece. And those kind of fights, like in the first episode where you have Zoro's bar fight, it's sick. It's a really awesome fight, and he doesn't even need him to like bring out his swords. The camera work and the care that goes into each one of these moments really brings in and exemplifies all the effort that went in. I watched like every trailer as it was coming out. I was skeptical at first, growing more and more excited and nervous about it as it got closer and closer to coming out. But one of the things that I was super nervous about in the trailers was how Sanji's fighting style would translate into live action. Because when I looked at it in the trailers, and when I think about it, just how it works, Sanji is someone who only uses their legs. They only use kicking because they're a chef. They're never going to use their hands to fight. They need their hands for cooking, so they only use their legs. And I was worried that wouldn't translate well, but it absolutely does. And Sanji has some incredible moments in this where his fight choreography is just really engaging. There's one small altercation he has around when he's being introduced that just is such a great setup for his character as a fighter. It solved a lot of the worries I had about that character being translated. And then there's characters who just work better in live action than even their manga and anime adaptation parts. Like, let's take Buggy. I love Buggy. I think Buggy is a stupid, ridiculous character. I love how unearned the love that they get from everyone in the world is. And Buggy's a character that every time he's in the anime or in the manga, he's absurd, and that's a lot of fun. Buggy in the live action adaptation is just heightened in every sense of the word. I adore the performance Jeff Ward puts in as Buggy. I think it takes every aspect of what makes him work in his introduction arc, his menacing side, his ridiculous side, his absurd and dark humor, morbid humor that he has. And in episode 2, it's the performance that sold me on the entire series. It was when these scenes happened, when Buggy came onto the screen, it was when I was like, okay, I'm into this. I'm buying in, right? Because when I pressed play, when I started the live action adaptation, I felt like the first episode was a bit rushed, especially the first 15 minutes. There's a lot of aspects of the early story that feel really rushed as they struggle to cram in as much as they're cramming in, because episode 1 feels the most jam-packed of all the episodes. Like, they just need to set up the world, they need to set up Roger, they need to set up Garp, they need to set up the execution, the world of pirates, they gotta set up Luffy, all Zoro, Nami, all these things, Axe Hand Morgan, all these different aspects crashing into one episode. And at the beginning of that here, I felt like it went a bit fast and I wasn't really bought in. And as the episode went along, there were some things that there's small gripes I have about the series, and one of it was just like the pacing felt weird. Episode 2 changed a lot of that for me, and because when we had this adaptation, when we had Buggy, when you're taking a character that's supposed to be funny and ridiculous and you're adapting them into live action, in previous anime adaptations, I'd seen that come off really like they didn't buy the character, right? That's actually one of the worst things that can happen in an adaptation, is when it feels like a character is not understood by the writers of the adaptation. Like they have this character and they're like, well, fuck it, I don't know how we're gonna make this work. We're gonna tone them down and remove anything interesting about them, or we're gonna take them and we're going to heighten them in certain ways that just makes them feel like they're not the same character that was in the manga, right, or in the anime that you love. And the One Piece live action doesn't really do that to any of the characters. Nothing world-breaking, in my opinion. All the characters, exemplified by Buggy, feel so accurate. Even their weird eccentricities feel so accurate to what was portrayed, right? This is a story that is wildly different than the source text in the terms of the step-by-step plot of the series. From point A to point B to everywhere in between, the details are very different. right? The characters that show up, the actual way that they resolve the plot, all of those things for almost every arc is very different. But the overall plot, the characters, all of that is the same. All of that is true to the source material. And that's the stuff that really drives the series home, that really makes everything pop. I could go on and on episode by episode to talk about things that I loved and things that I had problems with, or small things here and there, each and every episode that I would like to see changed or that I'm excited for. There's things I could go on and on about for hours, but I don't really want this to be a spoiler review. If you want a spoiler review, then let me know. You know, if the response to this is good, then I'm more than willing to make one. I love talking about One Piece. But for now, what I'm gonna say is that One Piece live action exceeded anything that I thought was possible with a live action series. I really love everything that they've done. I cannot wait for season 2. I don't know how they're gonna format and break this series up. I hope that they actually give Alabasta a majority of a season. I'm really excited to see who they cast for the rest of the crew, because we're getting a season 2. And I have it in my soul. It hasn't been officially announced at the time of recording, but it's in my soul. I know that we're getting a season 2, and I can't wait to see it. And the most important thing I want to leave you all off with today before we go is that the writers, the actors, all those people involved in making this series come to life, making these characters pop off the screen in the ways that they did, all deserve to be paid fairly by Netflix. Yeah, that's right. It all comes back to the writers and actors strike. These people deserve to get paid well, because Netflix would not have a hit like this if it wasn't for the hard work of the writers and actors who brought this world to life. They made a great series. One Piece live action is not the best show you will ever see. It's not. There's tons of small moments, small gripes that I can have throughout this series that, you know, maybe I would do something different. Maybe this line didn't land. Maybe this moment was a little flat, but that's gonna happen in every TV show. This show, from episode 1 to episode 8, thrilled me, and it sold me. It's a series that committed itself to faithfully adapting these characters while understanding what adaptation means, and also doing so with a lot of practical effects, practical sets, amazing costumes, and just an understanding of the full world that it's in. Every single Easter egg they brought in, they brought so many Easter eggs of later things in the story, and those things they just have such an understanding of the world that they can add in so many small things. And One Piece is such an expansive world that they can make those feel totally normal. I loved it. I loved everything that they did here, and I'm just really looking forward to when the writers and actors strike ends and they are given what they deserve, which is huge raises and, you know, actual access to the profits that they generate for these massive companies. Once their demands are met and the strike is over, I'm excited for them to get working on season 2. So, you know, end the fucking strike so that we can get our goddamn One Piece, you piece of shit. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me. If you want to hear more about me ranting about One Piece, let me know. Like this video, comment if you want to hear more from me. Those things both really help the video out and help me out. I just love seeing people comment and, you know, give their own takes on things. And I see every comment. I try to respond as much as I can. But I appreciate y'all. Thank you very much for staying through this video. I hope y'all have a great day, a great night, or whatever it is you're having. And stay rad.